Hey, what up, guys? So in this lesson, we're going to be talking about the list data type, right? So we're going to kind of discuss what is it, how to use it. I want to discuss some of the methods that come with the list data type when it comes to adding, removing items, things of that nature, guys. So let's get started. So let's go ahead and talk about again list data type. So a list data type is list can be used to store multiple items into a single variable, right? So again, when you're dealing with a list, we have an object, right? One object of a list, and you could add additional items to that list. A good example would be, let's say you're trying to collect a list of people that are over 6 feet tall, and maybe that list consists of 10 people. So now you'll be able to add those 10 people's name to this list. Think it's no different than you writing a checklist or a grocery list, right? You're gonna go grocery shopping, you want to create a list of items for you to go shopping at the store. That's exactly what a list is, right? You have one object, and that object you're adding all of the different items that relate to that list. A list are used to store a collection of data. Again, we're collecting data. No, again, a grocery list is a good example. You want to create a grocery list object, and then ultimately we're adding items to that list of what you're going to buy at the grocery store. That's exactly what that is. So what list objects are? They're ordered. So, and by order, that means that the items have a defined order. So a good example would be if you have a grocery list, and let's say you have your first item is milk, your second item is bread, your third item is eggs. Well, if you were to call that list, that object, and go look at what's in that object, it's going to be the same order. Milk is going to be first, bread is going to be second, eggs are going to be third, right? The ordering does not change. And that's ultimately what this means. Anytime you add items to your list, it's going to be in that same order when you come back to it later to access the data in that list. Changeable. So what this means is items are changeable, meaning that we can change the items after the list has been created. So whenever you create a list object, we could add on to the list. Again, grocery list, you create a grocery list, we could add on to it. After you create the list, later on, maybe when you're at the store, you're like, hey, there's another item, that you want to add to the list. You could add it. Same thing, right? You have an object, and you could add on to it later on. You could either add it at the end of the list, you could add it in the middle of the list, you could remove items from the list. That's pretty much what changeable means. We have the flexibility to do that. And then duplications are allowed. So in a list, you could have duplicates. Again, going back down to grocery lists, you could have milk as the first item, bread, second item, eggs, third item. Then you could have milk again. Item number 4, it could be milk again. So keep that in mind. Duplicates are allowed. And that's one of the things you got to keep in mind when you're dealing with a list. If you're compiling together a unique list, you got to be aware that it is going to allow duplicates. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, guys, so these are a list of methods that are included in the list object. So the first one is list. This is a way where you could create a list. And then we have append. So append is ultimately to add on to the list, right? If we want to add items to the list, then you would append it. And it's append because it gets added towards the end of the list. Then we have the sort method to be able to sort the list. Pop is to remove an item from the list. But again, we got to specify an argument. So it does take an argument. The argument is going to be an index placement, which is a numerical value, right? So let's say for the example of milk or grocery list, we got milk, bread, and eggs. Well, if we want to remove milk from the list, we got to specify that index placement. And in Python, the first item of a list, the index placement is always 0. It doesn't start at 1, it starts at 0. So we would have to specify pop 0 and that will remove the first item out. Now remove, it's a little bit different. Remove is another message, but in this case, we have to specify the actual name of the item that we want to remove. So for example, if we want to remove milk, we would actually put the word milk in single quotes in here, and that would be the item that it will find and it would actually remove. Copy is to copy a list. We want to copy one list, and we're going to ultimately create a new object, a new list object. So you use a copy message for that. And then ultimately the last one is extend. And extend would be a good way when you're trying to like merge two lists together. So now let's go ahead and let's do some testing over some of these methods and kind of show you how it's utilized. Okay guys, so the first thing that I'm going to show you is we're going to create the people list. So you know how I showed you earlier, we could call the list method to create a list. Well, there's another way to do that, which is square brackets. This will create a list as well, so keep that in mind. So we have two options, right? We have people list. So we could do it this way or this way. Both of these will create a empty list for you, right? So that's something to keep in mind. They will both create a list for you. So I'm going to call this create list. That's what we're doing here. The next thing that we're going to do is let's do add item to list. So this is where the append method comes in, right? So we have append, and then we're going to specify then whatever item is going to be, right? Again, we could append anything. We could append integers, string values, doesn't matter. List inside another list. Pretty much an object, any kind of object could get appended to this list. So in our case, we're adding people's names. So the first name is going to be called Mike Jones. So if I were to print this out, let's see what we get. So as you could tell, we have a list. As you could tell, square brackets, because that's what we're dealing with. And it says Mike Jones. Okay, because that's what we added. We added Mike Jones to the list. So that is the way to append. So the next thing is, let's go ahead and append something else, right? So let's say, for example, we're going to go ahead and append John Smith, right? So now we're going to have two. Now the reason why I want to append two, because the next thing is we're going to do a sort. Sort items in list. So we know we're gonna have two items because we appended two items to it. Now we want to be able to sort our list. So what we're gonna do here, we're gonna do people list dot sort. So if I sort it, and if I guess let me comment this out first. Let's run it. So this is our new list. We have Mike Jones and John Smith. Now, if we run this sort method, it's going to sort the items. Let me kind of hover over it. Sort the list in ascending order and return none. So let's go ahead and sort it. And now you can see it's John Smith and Mike, because again, it's from A to Z. Like in this case, we're dealing with letters. If we're dealing with numbers, it will be from 1 to lowest number to highest number. So that's a way to sort it. Okay, so now we got that sorted out. As you can see, it sorted it from A to Z. So the next thing that we're going to do, guys, we're going to remove an item, right? So let's talk about that. We're going to remove item by index, right? Because there's two ways to remove an item. One way is by index, the other way is going to be remove item by value. So let's do it by index first. So in this case, we're going to do people list dot pop. Okay, so let's kind of read what this is saying. Remove and return item at index. So index, keep in mind, if we take a look at this example here, the first item is index 0. Because again, in Python, it doesn't start at 1, it starts at 0. Index, think of indexes as placements. You have a starting point, you're starting at point A, and then, in this case, our first item is considered index 0. Then as you start adding more items, it goes 1, 2, 3, etc. So in this case, this is item index 0. Then our second name is index 1. So let's say we want to remove, after we sort it, we want to be able to remove John Smith, which is going to be item index 0. So we're going to specify here pop 0. So again, if we go ahead and print this out, see now all we're left in our list is one value, which is Mike Jones. So let me go ahead and comment this out because we don't want to run this code. But now let's say we want to remove item by, we want to remove it by name. And the name is going to be Mike Jones, right? So that means we want to keep John Smith but remove Mike Jones. So if I run this, boom, now we have one item in the list and it's John Smith. So again, that's the difference. Pop would be remove an index. Remove, you got to specify the value that you want to remove. Okay. Now here's where pop comes in handy and how you would use it. Let's say if you have a grocery list, how we mentioned, right? You got 20 items in the grocery list and you're shopping for each item one by one. So because if you're iterating, we haven't talked about this, but we're going to talk about it later on in the lesson, where you will iterate over a list. And by that means you're going to go over the first item, milk. You're going to shop for milk, and once you found your milk, you're done. What do? You cross it out your list, for example. Well, in this case, more programmatic, we could do, hey, I found my milk. Now we're going to just remove it from the list. But I don't want to remove, any item from the list. I want to remove the first item from the list. So in this case, we're going to pop the index 0. Or we could specify what we're removing, right? So if it's milk, we will enter in the value milk, and that will get popped out, get removed from the list. So again, that's just an example on how, a basic example of the differences. So let me go ahead and comment this out because we don't want to remove nothing again. So the next item that we could do is, let's say we want to copy a list, right? So we're going to do copy list. So let's say we're going to call this a new people list. So there's a few ways to do this, right? So one way could literally be, it would be people, if we pretty much assign the same list that we have, right, the people list, to this new people list. This is one way to pretty much copy it, right? Copy this list to a whole different object. And because this other object, we could do something else with it. And maybe we don't want to mess up the original list object. That's an example. But if I run this, you could tell we got the same values, John Smith, Mike Jones, right? Because we're literally copying that item. So another way to do it would be, there is the copy method, right? Again, we're copying, the results are the same. Again, you don't see this often. Most likely, what you will see in most code bases will literally be this object being assigned to this object. That's the way again, there's more than a few ways to do it, but this is the option that you will see most likely in production code, at least what I have seen. I do see some code bases where they're using the copy method, but not as much anyways. The next thing we're going to be talking about is going to be merge list. So again, let's say we know we have a people list, and then we have what's called a new people list. Okay? And let's say we want to merge those two together, right? We want to merge them together. So we have two different objects ultimately, right? We have a people list object that has two people names. We have another list object, what you call a new people list object, and we want to be able to merge them together. So we do have a few ways to do that. One way to do that could be, we're going to call this updated people list equals new people list, and it literally could be plus, right? Plus people list. So literally we're just adding together, right? When you do that, you're pretty much taking list, put them together. So now if we were to print this, let's go ahead and run it. You can see we have one list, but now we have 4 items in there, right? Because I mean, John Smith, Mike Jones, and John Smith, Mike Jones. Again, I know there's the same because again, it does allow duplicates, right? We talked about that. List allows duplicates, but this is an example on how if you have 2 lists, maybe they're different lists. Maybe you have a list of, you know, sales and non-sales people, and you want to be able to put them together to kind of give you a complete employee list or something of that sort. Well, this is one way to be able to do that. Okay, guys, so the next way to do it is we're going to be using the extended method to do this. Now, in this case, we don't need to assign it to a new object, so I'm going to remove this. But what we're doing, though, we're pretty much merging an existing object, and we're adding on to it. So the way we would do this would be dot extend, and again we need to remove this, and then ultimately it would take in a value, an object. In this case it would be the people list object. So again, an existing list, and then we're gonna take in another existing list under the extends method, and this will merge them together. So now if we were to go ahead and print new people list, we should get, again, same thing, a list of those 4 items, because this one has 2 items, this one has 2 items, and we're pretty much merging them together. So that's kind of what we're doing in this case. So again, guys, hopefully this helps out and gives a little bit more better understanding, a better insight to what our list, some of the methods that exist in lists when it comes to adding, removing, merging, copying, things of that nature. And again, I'm gonna have a lesson later on in this course where we're gonna be talking about iteration and loops, and we'll be iterating over list, so you kind of get an idea over that. So be on the lookout for that, guys. Again, hopefully this is beneficial, this helps out, and be on the lookout for the next lessons.